Welcome back to the table. Today, Ryan and I are going to give you a look at Kathmandu. This is the next Stefan Feld City Collection game, and this is, since Marrakesh, the next and first
fully
original game.
Yeah, this is about the journey to Kathmandu, and that journey is kind of exemplified by these tiles. And this is a variable setup. You're going to use different orientations of these tiles, and in fact, a different number of tiles based on the length of the game. And the whole object of the game is to get from this starting space here to Kathmandu over here while trying to score points along the way. And you're going to be scoring those points by making certain stops in these temples, by making certain stops in these cities to collect goods, and by interacting with these various terrain types that you see around the board. Now, you're going to be getting points from all of that and some significant points by being the first person to get to Kathmandu. But I think it's worth stressing at the beginning, this is not a race game.
No.
The goal is not necessarily to get to Kathmandu or be the first to. If you do manage to arrive there, you're going to get a point boost, but there are plenty of ways to score points that don't even involve getting you there. Now, that's going to be everything that's happening at the top of the board, and everything else in the game is just designed to help you in your journey across these tiles.
Yeah, this is a game not about efficiency, but a game about making the best with what you got. And what you have isn't always the best, so you need some things to help you. Down here in the main area here, we have this board that has a few different types of cards that players will be able to get. There's equipment cards, there's animal cards, and then what's currently called tent cards, but those are going to be sort of like sabotage style cards. The equipment cards are the cards that are really going to help you do things. There's a number of different equipment cards that let you bend and break the rules for all the things you're going to be doing, which we'll get to in a second. Then on your player board here, everyone's going to start with one of every of the resources. Then there's a space here to collect some of the city goods that you can get, as well as a place to place the dice that you're using in your game, because everyone's going to have these 6 die. You're going to roll those up at the beginning of the round. You're only going to use 3 of them during any given round, and each of those is different color, corresponding to different resources, and then the pip values are going to dictate how far you can move towards Kathmandu or potentially not toward Kathmandu.
Yeah, and that's the real puzzle of the game, is looking at the dice that you roll at the beginning of every given round and trying to figure out your path. And there's a couple things you're wanting to do with the dice. Like David just alluded to, when you're choosing a die, that's also going to give you one of those resources. Each one of these resources is used for different things. The backpack buys cards. The easel is going to help you paint the animals you see along the way, which is another way to score points. The coins are going to be spent in the city in order to buy goods. You're going to be feeding your yak some food to get past some of these obstacles. And then you're going to be using these compass tokens if you're ever moving against the compass. Based on the orientation of these tiles, there's going to be a compass printed on each one. If you move in the wrong direction, you have to pay. So all of those things are kind of going into your decision of which dice you're going to use, because when you choose a die, you are committing to moving your yak that many spaces in an orthogonal line. And so you have to kind of know if you're moving too far, if you're moving too a few. You need to kind of plan out where you want to land. And of course, there's a variety of reasons you might want to land in one space over another.
Yeah, so just to give you an idea of how it goes, I could choose this die right here. It's the purple die. It corresponds to the easel that lets me paint animals. So I'm going to use that purple 5. I would first take that resource, and then I could move orthogonally. At the beginning of the game, everyone's going to start here on the start line. I could go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And I landed on this space. A couple things happen. The first thing you check is this stack of tiles here. Everyone's going to start with the stack with a 10-point tile on the bottom, and all the rest are going to be shuffled up, and they correspond to different terrains and things you're going to interact with. Mine is that blue space, which is the water. That means that I can flip to the next one. That is effectively one of the core mechanics of every time you move. You're going to check to see if you moved into the place you wanted to this turn to keep that moving so you can get to those 10 points. Then you can see whether you're going to interact with this target space. In this case, it's one of the main terrain types, so it's going to let me interact with equipment cards and maybe the animals. You can see here, only one of these cards is the water type, so I could get rid of one of my backpacks to get this equipment card. Now these equipment cards, like we said, are going to do a number of things. The one I just picked up is actually going to allow me to store some maps safely, another way to score points, but sometimes those are up for grabs. But other equipment cards let you move your yak before you move, re-roll dice, let you break some of those rules. Instead of moving in a straight line, one of them might let you make one turn during your movement, which can be huge.
Yeah, and these equipment cards can be comboed in specific ways. You might have some that increase the value of your dice that let you move farther or that let you make multiple turns if you use these cards. And you're going to start the game out with 3 of them, but you have to earn more of these. And the only way you can earn more of these is by stopping on those specific spaces. Now, you can end up in a good situation like what David just demonstrated, where landing on a certain terrain type lets you flip over the yak tile and also potentially buy one of these cards. But that's the only time you can do that. The same goes for painting these animals. If you manage to land on this terrain type, you can spend an easel to paint the animal and it goes over to a little collection. You might get lucky and there might be multiple cards in the row that fulfill that same requirement. If there were multiple water cards, David could have interacted with all of them. But there are 2 other types of terrain that you might be landing on, and that's going to be the cities and the temples. And both of those, again, give you more ways to score points. The temples are very simple. You have these little markers on your player board. When you stop at a temple, you can place that marker and it uncovers a point value. If you get all of your markers off, it's going to give you 55 points. Now, of course, this is going to be variable based on which tiles are face up, how many tiles you're using. There's only going to be a certain number of temples in every game. And hitting these temples is one of your requirements in that stack of yak tokens. So you're going to want to at least visit 1. And again, trying to time that is important. But if you can hit all of the temples, you're going to get a lot of points. And you're going to be able to collect these map tokens. Every time you visit a temple, I guess you're stopping for directions.
Maybe.
They're going to give you a little piece of this map. And you'll notice that there are A's and B's of different colors. You can match any A and B for points. But if you manage to match the correct color, they're worth even more points. And if you have one of those chests, like David described, they're worth double. So there's a lot of reasons to collect these. And this is where a little bit of the PvP comes in. There's not only just that possibility to sabotage with the sabotage cards. If you land on the same space with an opponent, you can force them to swap map cards back and forth so that maybe you could make a match where they maybe lose a match. So there is a little bit of player interaction with those map tokens.
Yeah, so you can tell already there's a number of obstacles in your way. A couple more things to explain out here on the map are those city spaces. When you land on one of these, you can spend a coin to take that good. And if the larger version of that good is available also, you can spend a second coin to take that as well. That's significant points. All of the larger goods are worth 7 points, and these range from, I think, 3 up to 5 points. Then, we mentioned this earlier, there's this compass space here. If you are moving in the direction of the red arrow on the compass, you have to spend a compass token to do so. So it makes some of these tiles, depending on how you've set it up, it could be a very treacherous game where you're spending a lot of compasses, so you're going to want to spend those die to get the compass. But if you don't, you're going to take exhaustion. So if you don't have a compass to spend and you need one, or if you move into a mountain with a die because you can't go over the mountains unless you have the equipment to let you do so, you're going to take exhaustion. And then when you do, you're going to have up to 3 exhaustion. If you start your turn with 3 exhaustion, you take your turn as normal. You select a die, you place it, you take a resource, but you do not move.
Hey, you're exhausted.
You're exhausted. But then you get rid of your exhaustion tokens. It's just one of those cycles where exhaustion might stack up and sort of penalize you by limiting a turn.
Yeah, and there's one more way you can take exhaustion. We've kind of teased about these sabotage cards. Every round, somebody is going to get one of these to add to their hand. You're going to determine that by counting up the pip value of the dice you've spent. Whoever moved the fewest pips is going to get one of these sabotage cards, and then you can play it on an opponent if they land in a very specific terrain type. So you can kind of see maybe what they might be going for, and you can kind of plan ahead. If you use this token, they're going to take an exhaustion. You also take an exhaustion, I don't know if you mentioned this, if you can't move the full value of a dice you take.
Right.
So there are a lot of different ways you're going to be taking exhaustion, and of course there are some items that actually get rid of exhaustion. So managing that and trying to time it. If you're going to take 3 exhaustion, you want to do it in a time when maybe you don't need to move that far. So there's a lot of planning that you kind of have to do when you're planning your route. But of course, you can't just plan a route and stick with it, because the way that this stack of yak tokens comes up, the way that some of these items come out, maybe one is really juicy and it's going to cause you to change your plan a little bit. So you do have to, like David said, you think one of the first things you said, it's a very reactive game.
Yes, for sure. You're going to be relying mostly on the dice that you roll.
Yeah.
And like we said, there are some equipment that allow you to mitigate those. There is a natural way to mitigate as well. Like I said, you're going to be using 3 die. Use your first die, but on the second and third die that you use during a round, you have the option to get rid of one of the other of your 6 die. just temporarily, just for this round. And if you do that, you can no longer use that die, but you can pick one other of your remaining die and re-roll it. Now, here's the rub. You then have to use that die and the pip value that you rolled. So it could actually work against you, but it gives you some options, a little bit more to mitigate. And we didn't go through all of the equipment, but there's some that allow you to increase or decrease a pip. There's some that allow you to re-roll. There's some that allow you to flip dice over.
Now, you're going to be doing this over a number of different rounds, a variable amount of rounds. First of all, you can kind of set the number of rounds in the game based on if you want a beginner game or a more experienced game. And that round tracker is determined by these weather tokens. Every round, you're going to flip one of these weather tokens, and it might move that storm marker forward. What that storm marker is doing is effectively limiting how far you can go back. So if you missed something, maybe you wanted to go back to the temple and that storm marker is too far forward, well, you hit it, you can't go past it. If you get caught behind it, you're taking exhaustion. So that is kind of a way to kind of move the game forward and stop one player just doing a little circle and buying a lot of items or whatever. You have to keep moving. But the other risk is if somebody actually gets to Kathmandu, you just scored 15 points, but your game is over. It doesn't matter how many rounds are left in the game. You've already reached Kathmandu. Now, this is interesting because the other players don't have to stop. They can keep playing until they reach Kathmandu or if they run out of time. So if you're going to enter Kathmandu, you better make sure that you have a significant lead because the next player to reach it gets 11 points. So it's not like an insurmountable race to get to those 15 points. Like I said earlier, it's not a race game, but there is a little bit of benefit for being the first player to get there.
For sure. The next one down is 11 points. And I think based on our plays, everyone is generally going to keep moving. There's not going to be large gaps, but there can be large gaps. If you decide, you know what, maybe I'll just do this and get a bunch of points this way, forget the Kathmandu points. You could do that. If you get all the animals, that has an interesting scoring mechanic where you take whoever has the most and you subtract whoever has the least, and then all animals are worth that amount. So if I get all the animals and someone else has 0, I have all I have all the animal points. So that's just as good, if not better, maybe, than the Kathmandu points. But it is an interesting mechanic.
I mean, it's a standard Feld. If you've played Feld games, you've heard that term point salad. You're getting points from a lot of different ways. From the Kathmandu tiles, from buying these different city tiles, the goods tiles at the cities. You're getting points for the animals. You're getting points for collecting the maps. You're getting points for resources you have left at the end of the game, and losing points for your exhaustion tokens.
Yeah, you're going to lose points for exhaustion tokens. You're also going to lose points for any of these yak tiles that you didn't go through, instead of gaining points if you get all the way through them.
Yeah.
In the game that we just played, neither of us got all the way through. We had 2 tiles left, and I thought we actually did a pretty good job of getting through those. We still each lost 2 points.
Yeah, and the last way you could lose points is the number of spaces you're away from Kathmandu. So if you're not at least close to it when the game ends, that strategy of maybe buying every single one of those tiles as you move up could actually bite you because you're going to score some negative points. So it's a balancing act trying to get those positive points while also avoiding getting all those negative points.
Indeed. That is Kathmandu, the game that you have to make the most of what you have. Yeah. If you have any questions at all about it, please make them in the comments below. We'll get down there and answer whatever we can. The rules that we had were in flux. They are still tweaking and laying out the final rules, but like I said, we'll try to answer whatever questions you have. Until next time, make sure everyone has fun at the table, and we'll see you then.